Welcome back to Business Strategy as a Scientific Skill. I'm Deborah Dauber, and in this lecture I'll be walking you through a toolkit for developing strategy. By the end of this class, you should be able to describe the key elements of an enterprise's strategy, understand a few common tools used to facilitate strategy development and when to use them, be able to draft SMART objectives, and understand the value of monitoring progress towards goals. So let's revisit the structure of strategy. As we discussed in the prior course, the general process for an enterprise to develop a strategy involves first assessing their current state and setting what their desired state is, and then the development of strategy is simply a matter of developing a list of prioritized, specific objectives to follow in order to get from the current state to the desired state. In this course today, we're going to talk in a little bit more detail about tools that help in the development of the strategy itself. It's actually a very simple process. First, generate as many ideas as possible. Second, prioritize those 5 or 10 most critical ideas that have to happen in order for the enterprise to achieve their goals. And finally, get specific on those high priority objectives. For each of these, I'm going to walk through the goal, the step, and also some tools that will help in getting there. First, generation of ideas. What are some ways you can generate ideas? Well, first off on here, this slide, we have the tried and true facilitated brainstorm. Many of you have probably experienced this in your own offsites or retreats yourself. It involves a team of people, usually a couple stacks of sticky notes, and you generate as many ideas as possible and literally just post them up on a whiteboard to think about. This is also something an individual can do on their own. I recommend finding as creative a spot as you can, and then just generate as many ideas as you can. Sometimes in a corporate setting, we'll choose to generate ideas using a little bit more of a structured approach. One example of this is war games. War games is the only tool I'm going to be talking about in this lecture that really requires a team. And that's because in war games, you take your team and you break yourself up into smaller groups. Each group represents a company, whether that be your regular employer or one of your competitors. And you go through a series of breakouts in which each group goes off and thinks through what are the most likely strategies that that company they're representing in the exercise is going to develop in response to the market conditions. After the breakout, everyone comes back together and talks about all the strategies that have been developed and specifically thinks about what that means for your main company and what kind of strategies you need to develop to be ready for each of those competitive plans. It's a little bit of a convoluted process, but it's great for generating ideas that are really robust in a competitive market. And finally, there are some checklists that are available to help make sure you're thinking about every aspect of your strategy as you develop it. The checklist I have shown here is called the 4 Ps, and it's used really commonly by marketing groups to think through each aspect of a marketing plan that's really critical. In this case, it's product, price, placement, and promotion. And a good, strong marketing plan will incorporate aspects of each of these pieces into their final marketing plan. Whatever strategy you use, facilitated brainstorm, a more structured approach, or a checklist, the goal of this first part of strategy development is just to get as many ideas on the table as you can. The second step is to prioritize them. Our first option on prioritizing is, again, a tool you've probably used before, either voting or forced ranking within a group, just to pick what are the top 3 or 5 or 10, whatever's a manageable amount, number of objectives to include in your strategy plan. Sometimes, if a company or a lab has a bunch of projects going on, it can be a little bit difficult to figure out relative priorities of different projects. And for that, there's a whole set of tools that we'll talk about as 2-factor matrices. A 2-factor matrix is really just a simple data visualization tool that helps to compare programs. Typically, the axes represent program strength and program desirability, and then you map the programs onto your axes, and the size of the bubble, or sometimes the formatting of the bubble, reflects program costs, program revenues, growth trajectory, etc. Any factor that seems relevant in your prioritization and your strategy development. And this then completed matrix allows you to compare cost-benefit of each program and determine some high-level strategy. I'm going to now walk you through 3 different examples of a 2-factor matrix, but I want you to keep in mind that there are many different variations you could choose from, and in developing a strategy, it's best to pick those factors that are most critical for your setting. Here's the first example. This is a growth share matrix. On this matrix, the x-axis, which I'm going to point out increases counterintuitively to the left, is market share, and the y-axis represents market growth. Depending on where each program hits this matrix tells you a little bit about what kind of strategies you want to be considering. In the upper left quadrant, you have programs that have both high market share and are in high growth markets. These are great programs. They're the stars. A company will invest in these programs because they're producing lots of revenues, and it's basically all system go. You really want all your programs to be in this upper left quadrant. In the lower left quadrant, you have programs that are high in share still, but maybe in a small growing market or even a shrinking market. These are the cash cows. These programs make a lot of money, and so the company is going to keep them around, but they may or may not invest any new money in because the market is not growing as much as it could be. Now, if the company feels they can invest in a cash cow and move it upwards into that star category, it will. Otherwise, it's probably not worth investing in a cash cow. In the lower right, we have programs that have a low share and are in a low growing or even shrinking market. These are the dogs. Typically, the guidance on a dog is to divest. You want to get rid of that program because it's just not worth it for the company. Now, I want to make the point that dog is a relative term. For a big pharma company who wants a blockbuster drug, that's a drug that nets $1 billion per year, a $50 million product is a dog. It's really not worth it for them to invest in it. However, for a young biotech company that just wants to get some revenues or maybe wants to get some experience selling drug, that same $50 million drug is a huge boon. It's a star for them. And so typically that's why you see dogs are divested rather than killed, because that program still has value for some company out there. And finally, we have the upper right quadrant. This is a quadrant where your share is low, but you're in a growing market, and you have to think a little bit more about the strategy for this program. Clearly, if you can invest and move that over into a high share, high growing market, make it a star, that's what the company is going to do. Sometimes you just can't move the share, or for whatever reason, it doesn't make sense to invest. So a company may do a variety of different things with the program in that matrix. Whatever it be, wherever the program is, you can see that these matrices already start to give the company a sense of prioritization, where to put resources, where to invest, and where maybe to divest some programs. Another variation on the two-factor matrix is the Attractiveness-Strength Matrix. In this case, the x-axis represents program strength, which may include market share, but also might include other factors such as marketing ability. And on the y-axis, we have market attractiveness, which again will involve market growth, but may also involve market size or other factors that make the market particularly attractive to your enterprise. This matrix is interpreted very similarly to the prior one, in that the closer you get to the upper left, the more the companies like to invest and really try to milk as much as they can out of that program. The more you're in the lower right, the more the company is going to think about divesting and maybe getting rid of that asset. The yellow line's kind of in the middle. If the company feels like they can invest and push it into the upper left quadrant, they will, but there may be other factors at play for those programs. I want to now walk you through an example of a two-factor matrix that's used more commonly in the nonprofit world. In this case, the x-axis, now increasing to the right, is profitability of a program, and the y-axis is impact. Now, a nonprofit organization doesn't care as much about profits as they do their mission. So in this case, impact involves alignment with the mission, involves scale and depth of engagement, and it involves availability of alternatives. So if I'm running a nonprofit organization that's providing job services, and I offer a career training session, but so does everyone else, and my clients have many options, that's going to have less impact than if I'm in an area where there really is a lack of career training services in my area and I'm the only game in town. When you map the programs onto the two-factor matrix, the size of the bubble in this case reflects the annual budget of the program, which often is far more impactful to the nonprofit than the profitability of the program. So for example, if I'm looking at this now as a nonprofit and I'm trying to figure out my relative strategies, this career workshop program here is really nice. I like it. It's very high impact. It loses a little money, but not too much. As a nonprofit, I'm very excited about that program. My online resources, on the other hand, they're not so impactful, and I'm not losing a lot of money. But if they start losing more money, I might start thinking about removing those online resources, or at least not investing in them, because it's not the biggest impact. As a nonprofit, I want to make a lot of impact. Now, this is for nonprofits, but if you wanted to then continue to convert this matrix towards an academic setting, you might replace profitability with productivity. So you have a 2x2 matrix now where you're looking at productivity of your programs on one side and impact on the other, and maybe budget is the size of the circle, and you can see how that already starts to get you thinking about which research programs you want to continue in your lab. So now in this process, we've developed a long list of options and we've prioritized. Now it's time to make our most critical objectives as specific as possible, and specifically we're going to get smart by writing the objectives in SMART format. Many of you may have used this yourself, and you'll be happy to hear it's a good career skill because SMART objectives are used everywhere throughout the industry. So SMART stands for specific, measurable, depending on who's trained you, either actionable or attainable, relevant or realistic, and time-based. The critical thing about SMART goals is that they're very specific, they're very time-based, and it's something you can actively monitor over the course of time. Here's some examples of some not-so-SMART goals, and then the SMART iteration of them. Not-so-SMART goal might be grow market share. It doesn't really mean a lot in the absence of any other context or data. The SMART version might look like grow from 5 to 15% market share by the end of the year. It's time-based, it's specific, you know what you have to do. Here's another example. If I'm a research lab, I want to publish. That's not really very helpful to track, is it? The SMART version might be publish 3 first author manuscripts in either Tier 1 or 2 journals in 2018. It's very specific and it's very clear if you're going to achieve that goal or not. If you're a young company, you might want to partner. Well, again, partner is pretty vague. This one I broke into two separate objectives. In this case, step 1 is to develop a roadshow presentation with 4 potential partners by the end of Q1. And step 2 is then to meet with at least 3 of those partners in Q2. So now you can see we've gone from some pretty vague, not very helpful, semi-directional, not so SMART goals to a really concrete plan that's easy and clear to follow over the course of time with the SMART goals. The beauty of SMART goals is you can then track them. And so here on this slide, we have what's called a balanced scorecard, in which all we're doing is just looking each quarter at how we're doing against the goals. So goal 1, grow from 5 to 15% market share by the end of the year. Well, it looks like Q1 was a little iffy, but then we got on our feet, and as of the end of Q3, I'm feeling very good about our ability to meet this goal by the end of the year. Where all systems go on this one. Publication, not doing so well. As of the end of Q3, we're still very much in the red. So this tells me either we've set a poor goal, an unrealistic goal, or we hit a block in the road, or we need to change our resources around somehow. Some action needs to be taken, or we're not going to meet this goal. This is an area that as a leader, I'm going to pay very close attention to. Not necessarily punitively, more just to get myself and my enterprise back on track. And as you can see, then you step through all the goals and fill it in. And as a leadership group, or even as an individual, you can look at this and see what are the trouble areas, what are the safe areas, where do I really need to be paying the most attention? The balanced scorecard helps you maintain focus on your strategy, it helps you track the progress, and it gives you early warning in case you need to make changes to address problem spots. And this brings us back again to the structure of strategy. We've now talked through how to develop a strategy through the generation of objectives, setting priorities on these objectives, and getting smart and, in fact, really specific with those objectives. And that brings us to the end of this particular lecture on the Developing Strategy Toolkit. You should now at this point be able to describe the key elements of an enterprise's strategy, understand a few common tools used to facilitate strategy development and when to use them, be able to draft SMART objectives, and understand the value of monitoring progress towards goals. Thank you very much for listening.